Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Harmonious World. My name is Hilary Seabrook and I am delighted to be joined by film composer Sherri Chung. Sherri is a stalwart of Hollywood and I'm excited to be talking with her about how she works with clients to produce the music that goes alongside and helps tell the story that's also on the screen. So she's creative, absolutely she's creative, but she's got strict guidelines to follow. You probably never heard of Sherri Chung, but you will almost certainly have heard her music. She's written for some of the great American TV shows and some films. So Riverdale, Blind Spot, The Red Line, Batwoman, Kung Fu, the new Gremlins series. And she has just made history by being elected the first female governor of the Television Academy's music branch. What you're listening to now is The Journey Begins, which is from that Gremlins soundtrack. I hope you enjoy listening to my conversation with Sherri Chung. So welcome to Harmonious World, Sherri Chung.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
That's great. So I want to talk to you about the soundtrack for Based on a True Story, which is a new thing that you've just done, but also about your background and the way you're working in Hollywood, which, you know, sounds terribly glamorous, but I'm sure isn't always. One of the things I particularly want to talk to you about is how you, although you're obviously very creative, you work within constraints.
Yes.
So, with the film, it's got to fit with the film.
Absolutely. I mean, it's so funny because I feel like as a creative, and I wonder if your other listeners who are creatives would feel the same way, that, it's I need parameters. Like I need like that, to build that sort of sandbox, that playground, and then I can have fun in that playground, I guess. But yeah, it's very much there's all kinds of constraints. There's all kinds of parameters, and it's I mean, you mentioned one. It's like it's got to fit within the film. So obviously there's parameters of like creative ones where it's like, this is not necessarily what my entire vision is. It's got to work within the vision of your filmmaker or your producer or your director, or your showrunner, depending on who your god is, as it were, in on any given project. But there's also time constraints. It's got to be done in 3 weeks, or it's got to be done in 1 week, or it's got to be done in 3 months, or something, whatever it is. And then there's also budget constraints. We don't have the budget to record a large orchestra, so how am I going to design the score, because it can't be necessarily a fully orchestral sound if there's not a budget to be able to properly produce that sound. So I guess, how do I do? I mean, for me, I just work really well. I work better with those types of constraints. But I think it's a puzzle. I like that puzzle. I like that challenge, I guess. But it can be difficult. It can be difficult because you sort of run up to against these roadblocks, and you say, okay, well, I can't get it done with this amount of money, with this amount of time, so I have to design it in a way that it can be done. And some of that's a little bit of my schooling. I did go to school for it, but some of it's just, the school of the experience of doing it. And sometimes it's not always going to be the what you wanted it to be. But you know what, you're not the only one who's dealing with those constraints. Your filmmakers are also, it's never going to be exactly, no one has unlimited resources unless you're Hans Zimmer or Steven Spielberg, maybe.
Right.
But yeah.
Okay, so one of the things that fascinates me is how you decide on the orchestration. So whether you're going for a trio or a quartet or a string or who makes that decision? Do you make that decision and come to it for a brief, or does somebody else make that decision?
Yes. we all kind of, I mean, there are definitely times where I think a lot of your listeners have heard of like temp music, so when I get a project, whether it's a film or whether it's an episode, a lot of times they've already put temporary score in there, and I guess it happens because, a lot of editors like to do it because they want to cut to the music, but a lot of times for the network higher ups, the executives, for the people that the filmmakers have to answer to, they need to hear music, and sometimes it's just a good way to just kind of just get some ideas flowing, so a lot of times the music is, that temporary music is it's suggesting, a sound, but a lot of times I'll come into it and I'll be like, I'm kind of thinking this, or I'm kind of thinking that, and they'll say, well, cool, I'm thinking that as well, or like, wow, I hadn't thought about that, show me, what do you mean? And sometimes I'll sort of retemp it myself before, or sometimes I'll just write something and be like, oh, this is kind of what I'm thinking. So again, I think some of those ideas happen because, and I think this is really fascinating, that I've kind of learned over time, that not every instrument works on every character. Not every instrument works on every look of a project. Sometimes guitar really doesn't work. Sometimes acoustic guitar really doesn't work on something. Sometimes strings really don't work, and sometimes they do work. Or sometimes it's only strings that work. And it's a really interesting. I think it's fascinating. I don't think there's a rule to it. It's just sometimes it just doesn't feel right, and other times it does. It really could only be that, So it's definitely a conversation. It's a collaborative effort, and it's a trial and error, and just throw things up there and see what works, see what sticks, see what resonates with people, and what doesn't.
Yeah. Do you sometimes get a brief that where there's a specific instrument that evokes us or represents a specific character?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes they'll actually write some of those things into the script, like, which, I mean, between us all, I find that a little irritating. I mean, it's part of the story. Like, for instance, I don't know this for a fact, but I think I read this somewhere, like on the show Wednesday. We all knew that the character Wednesday plays cello, so that was kind of written into the script. That's a little bit different. So for something like that, where it's like, oh, this character is playing guitar, or they're going to be on stage and they're going to be playing those instruments, or they're going to be in a band. That's different. That's
Yeah,
not really
yeah.
talking so much about score so much as it, but it does influence sometimes. um but yes, sometimes it's written in there, and sometimes it's also written into the script. Sometimes that there's a lot of what we call needle drops or source music. There's a lot of licensed songs and that kind of thing, and I take note of that, because in the score, if I know there's going to be a lot of licensed songs, and if I know what they are, or what kind of music it's going to be, um, that actually can influence score a little bit too. For instance, if it's going to be like, alt rock or something, I don't even know if that's a phrase we even use anymore, but like it's going to be that kind of rock. There's a rock thing, or there's a rock element, and there's going to be a lot of like, electric guitar, or like that kind of stuff. I won't write that into the score. It's like, okay, we're already going to have that. So the score, I think, might have a different sway. Maybe it'll be acoustic guitar instead, or maybe it'll be more acoustic, um, you know, of an approach. There's a way to work with that kind of music that sometimes is opposite. And somehow it has to jive with it.
Right. That's fascinating. I mean, we could talk about this for hours, but
I know.
um, okay. So you're working quite a lot at a fairly high level, and you're quite influential in terms of I have just been told that you've been elected the first female governor of the Television Academy's music branch. That's huge.
It's great. It's crazy. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. It's interesting. I mean, what's funny is that it's not just for the listeners out there. It's not in the music branch. There are 31 branches of our television academy. So this would be the academy that gives out the Emmys, let's just say, as opposed to the one that gives out the Oscars, which is the motion picture academy. And then you have the Grammys, which is the recording academy. So with the television academy, there's 31 branches, and one of them is music. And there are other branches that have had female governors for a long time. So it's really only our music branch that has not had a female governor until me. So it's great, and it's a privilege. It's definitely a position of service, and it's a volunteer position, and I'm happy to serve it. I'm happy to do it, and it's a lot more work than I expected, but I think it's important, and I think it's, just when you're I'm not a political person, so being sort of elected into something where it's a bit, it's not really political per se, but it's definitely more political than um, any other position I've ever, like anything else I've done before. So it's a privilege. It's an honor, I think, to sort of represent your peer group and your peers and your colleagues. And
Yeah.
and I truly believe in the integrity of the award. It's not the only thing that the Television Academy does, but I definitely believe in the integrity of the award and the Academy itself. So yeah, it's a great
Yeah.
honor.
Yeah, I mean, Emmys are very well respected, and they're often what we take as a kind of badge of something, especially stuff that's come over from the States. If it's come over and it's had Emmy nominations already, we go, okay, kind of, we know there's a quality about that. And I think
Yeah.
especially Emmys for the music, because obviously, somebody like me, when I choose to watch a television show, the music is hugely important. And if I don't like the music, that puts me off completely. So I think it's a good
Yeah,
thing.
same here. Yeah, no, yeah, I agree. I agree. There's a caliber, um, a caliber and a vetting. It's almost like, oh, this person is, or that score won, or this television show, was nominated, and it means something. And I like that. I think it's very cool, and it's just a way. I mean, everybody says awards don't matter unless you
Yeah.
win one,
Yeah.
maybe until you win one, but or nominated or something. But I do think that, as you said, there is that you know pedigree or something that kind of comes with it. There's something about it that it's like a vetting process in our industry, and so it's well respected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think film and television has come under a lot of criticism for its lack of representation. And I think the fact that you've been given this voice, this sort of platform, if you like. You don't have to be political about it, but you're nevertheless, you are representing the rest of us, women or
Yeah.
people of color or whatever it is. So
Absolutely. It's a great honor all around, all around. I think the Television Academy is doing a lot of really great work in that way, and always having diversity, equity, and inclusion. They're really striving for that. They're really trying to make moves for that, which is great. So joining the ranks of other organizations in our industry that are doing the same, which is really
absolutely.
it's really great. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the programs that you have produced the music for is Gremlins, and
Yes.
I'm playing some clips within this podcast, and I started with The Journey Begins, which is a lovely. I really like that. But what I'd
Thank
like to
you.
play now is a clip from Wreaking Havoc. So why I particularly like that track is I haven't seen that scene from Gremlins, but I can imagine these little gremlin characters running around wreaking havoc.
Yeah.
So that particular piece of music is really evocative of and it paints a picture in your head. It's beautiful. It's wonderful.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. The show, the animated series, it's an animated prequel series to the original films, directed by Joe Dante, and he's actually a consulting producer on the animated series as well. So that was really great to have his input and his blessing, if you were, as it were. And so, but yeah, it was writing for the little gremlins as they're just wreaking havoc and causing mayhem and just being little jerks. it was kind of one of my favorite. There were so many things I love about scoring that project, but um those little guys are just some of my favorite to write for, because it was just it's kind of circusy. They're just kind of, it's like fun, you know, mayhem,
Yeah.
fun chaos, as it were. And so it kind of took a more of a circus, you know, circus feel to, at least it feels that way for me. That was kind of like the goal. It's like, something that's just that's fun, but chaotic and kind of messy. And it's, and just musically, not to get too nerdy, but musically, there was always a tritone on the bottom, like kind of like an oompa sound, but just, the tritone. So something that's a little bit off-putting. It's not entirely stable, but it's slightly predictable in its rhythm. So there's something stable about it, but there's also something that's kind of off, which is kind of how I view them.
Yeah. And that's because within the sort of the chaos of, as you say, the original film and now the animation, is there's a sense that although it's sort of chaotic and a bit bonkers and a bit, there's a safety in it, there's a stability in it, do you know what I mean, which I think is exactly
Yeah.
what you get from that music. So
Yeah, no, that's great. Oh gosh, and I love the films too, and there's something so endearing
yeah,
about even the bad Mogwai, even the bad Gremlins. There's something that's just kind of like super super fun about them,
yeah,
and it's really, it's kind of fascinating. Like you kind of love to root for them, because they're just
yeah,
causing chaos and just doing all the things that we might wish that we could do.
absolutely. Can you tell me a little bit about Based on a True Story and about how you came to work on that soundtrack?
Yeah, so based on a true story, live action. So that was, and it's also kind of its own chaos. It's a murder mystery thriller, comedic thriller, I guess. Which is actually, when you kind of get into it, it's actually more about an everyday couple just on the down and outs, just trying to do what they can to make it work and save their marriage, and they're just, hitting a hard time financially, and then, maritally. Somehow I heard about the project and I was like, I really want to go for this. I really want to, like, meet on this project. And turns out I already had known the showrunner, the creator and showrunner. I had worked with his wife on another project but unbeknownst to me, and I think even to him for a little bit, and then we realized who each other were. But I did demo for the project and took a meeting on it, and we just really saw eye to eye on, sort of creatively and visually what we wanted it to be, what he was creating, and what musically I wanted it to be. And it just kind of worked, and we it was just, I don't know, it was just a really really fun collaboration. But it was tough tonally, I would say, for me to figure out. We had to do a little bit of back and forth, which is very natural back and forth of just, collaborating and saying, does this work? Does this work? I don't know. And I really did lean on him for a lot of direction to, like, let me know, is it too far funny? Is it not far enough in the thriller aspect? Is it not far enough in the funny aspect? And so I really, it was a great collaboration, because I really needed him to sort of tell me, like, actually, we don't need to be this frantic. We don't need to be this funny. The actors are carrying that. We actually want to lean more into the horror aspect of it. Oh, okay, cool. So that was, but it was a challenge, a good challenge, a creative challenge to find tonally and to sort of figure out how far it needs to lean in either direction.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Tell me a little bit about your background, about how you got into this kind of music.
I'm a classically trained pianist, and which all sounds all cool and all, but I, I tell people that, like, I was a very talented, a gifted pianist, and I say that humbly, because I feel like that when I was younger, that I was seemed very gifted and talented, and then my age caught up with my talent, and so and so as I got older, it wasn't that impressive because just I feel like, I was not meant to be a classical pianist performer. I realized that very early on, but I have used it over the years for my for my creativity. I think I started realizing that I at a young age I wanted to write. I wanted to like create as opposed to just practice the music that already was. Although I did love that training as well, and I think that it really helped me in my musical training and in learning theory. And I think I was really fascinated with how music was put together. And I also think at a young age I realized, oh, there is an occupation called a composer because I had to learn about my composers as I studied their music. And around 12 or 13, I saw a little film called Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves with Kevin Costner, an amazing score by Michael Kamen. And I was really blown away by that score. I had never, of course, I'd seen movies before and heard music, heard scores, but I just never heard music like that before and never saw, a film and music work together in that way, or at least in a way that just moved me as much. And that's when I decided I wanted to do that for a living. And I really didn't know what that was. And, the internet wasn't what it was then as that it is now. And so I couldn't just Google search it or, YouTube videos on how to become that or how to get into that. So, and I'm also 12 or 13 at the time. I mean, so I'm just going to continue with school and learn as much as I could and just trying to study as much as I could. And then I went to college. I did my undergrad in composition and theory. So I took a very sort of formal training route. And then I did graduate work in um, writing for film and TV. So again, there are lots of ways to be successful in this industry and to get into this industry. But for me, like, learning it and going to school for it was definitely the way that I needed for me. And then after I graduated, I became an assistant to Walter Murphy, who writes the music for Family Guy and American Dad. And that's kind of how I started getting into television. I didn't do any writing for him, but I did some orchestration, and I just was learning so much from him and how to work with musicians, how to work with live musicians, and how to write on a TV schedule. He's such a fast writer and such a brilliant writer. And so I just you know, learned kind of like out of my league, in that way. But all the while I'm working in my league, doing my own, student films and smaller projects and independent projects, commercials, and just kind of cutting my teeth on my little things, as it were. And then I started working as an additional composer for Blake Neely, who does a lot of work in television and episodic, and just started really cutting my teeth in sort of in writing at a much higher level than I was, ever writing before. And then from there, I've just, kind of branched out and got my own, higher profile projects, built up my own network, and that's kind of where we are now, I guess. But yeah, it all kind of started from being a musician, and learning to read music and just being a part of music from a young age, and then seeing that movie.
Yeah.
That just
Yeah.
made me want to get there.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's fantastic. Thank you so much for telling you a bit about your story. It's
Yes,
really,
thanks.
really
Thank you
great.
for the opportunity. It's always fun, I think, to kind of revisit and look in retrospect, and you can see how far you've come, and really it puts things in perspective. So I appreciate the opportunity to revisit all of that.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you. Okay, well, thank you so much, Sherri.
Thanks so much, Hillary. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to that conversation with composer Sherri Chung. What you're listening to now is Transporting the Body, which is based on a true story. Thank you for joining me once more for Harmonious World, and don't forget that you can support the show. Also check out some of my album reviews on the blog. Thank you for listening to the latest episode of Harmonious World. My name is Hilary Seabrook, and it's a great delight to bring this series of discussions with musicians and composers and writers and all sorts of people to you. Obviously, there's no point in having a podcast if people aren't listening, and I'm very grateful to my listeners for doing so. Thanks also to Joe English for composing and performing this new theme tune. So wherever you get your podcast, you can leave a review. You can share this with your friends and family, either as a link or on social media and that sort of thing. I'd be really grateful for that. Don't forget that you can subscribe now. There's a link wherever you get your podcasts. So have a great week, and please remember why I started this, which is just to try and make the world a little more harmonious. Thanks for listening to Harmonious World.